Government has a job. It should do its job well and only its job. One of the most important things government can do is not waste our money. For 6 years, I've called out federal wasteful spending, and I've publicly exposed agencies that have dropped the ball. Then came COVID. COVID was a global health pandemic and a global economic crisis. COVID led to enormous federal spending to sustain our economy. Federal spending skyrocketed for the past 2 years to stabilize, quite frankly, the nation's economy. The result of that is even higher deficits and debt. We have a $2.8 trillion deficit, which means we're spending $2.8 trillion more in one single year than we take in. In 2019, before COVID, our national debt was $22.7 trillion. Today, our debt stands at over $30 trillion. $30 trillion. That's the equivalent of $1 of spending per second for 1 million years. A million years. It's the question I hear often. Where does all this federal money come from? We don't have a rainy day fund. We just have more borrowing from the future and more printing of money. When your family borrows money, you know you have to pay it back and pay interest on your debt. So you want to make sure that you only borrow money on things that are essential. How's the federal government doing with that basic principle? Last year, we paid $562 billion on our interest alone. That's over $500 billion in spending on our tax dollars just in interest payments. And our spending's not just on essential items. In years past, I've exposed in federal fumbles things like silent Shakespeare, Russian wine, and I don't know how many grants to study something crazy in another country. This year I've found things like $2 billion wasted because of the Biden administration's decision to not finish building the wall at our southern border, which is already paid for. We literally paid contractors last year $2 billion not to build a border security wall. I'm also highlighting things like the most recent federal spending bill and earmarks for things like $20 million for repairs at the U.S. Grant Presidential Library, $500,000 for an art walk project in Trenton, New Jersey, and millions of dollars for sidewalk projects and bike trails in Rhode Island and Vermont, just to name a few places. We'll shine light on some of the projects funded through grant programs for things like $90,000 to $115,000 on robot dogs at the border, $2.6 million going to Chinese health programs, $120,000 to write about Russians, $15,000 spent on a monkey opera. We all can't wait for that opera. $500,000 for the Nansen Ski Club in New Hampshire, or $3 million for a fisherman co-op in Guam, $30 million for safe smoking kits. How about $569,000 for lobster pot removal? All of that while we're experiencing the highest gas prices our nation has ever seen. There are things that we must pay for, like Social Security and Medicare benefits, military salaries, interest on the national debt, contracts and other payments. Social Security and Medicare are fundamental programs to help our nation's senior adults when they retire, but there's a crisis looming if we don't take action now. If we do nothing, Medicare will be insolvent and unable to pay its full benefits by 2026. Social Security is expected to go insolvent by 2034. These are not some distant years down the road. 2026 is in 4 years. This is a crisis we can all see coming, and we can work on solutions to address it if we start it now. One way to help protect these benefits for the people who depend on them most is to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in these programs. For example, did you know from 2014 to 2016, almost $11 million in Social Security benefits were stolen from 7,200 beneficiaries by someone altering their direct deposit information? Since 2010, Social Security paid more in benefits than it collected in taxes. In federal fumbles this year, we got to the bottom of actual solutions to address these big issues. This edition is like nothing you've seen before. This year, just like March Madness, you voted on some of the champions of waste in the federal government. You're engaged, and you're just as concerned as I am about the out-of-control spending. We're talking about some of the biggest drivers of our debt and my solutions for how we can turn things around. Follow me on social media everywhere at Senator Lankford to get the latest and to join in the conversations about how to address our federal spending. Welcome. Federal Fumbles Volume 6 is out now. Let's see if we can keep the federal government from dropping the ball.